It's been so long since I've done the podcast now. What do I say at the beginning? Uh, Hello and welcome to the Magic Mirror podcast. I'm your host, as usual. I guess I can't say as always anymore. Khan, the Trinket Mage. And with me is my co-host, 33 Elk.
Hello. So brackets, huh?
Yeah, so brackets. Today we'll talk about brackets. Probably just do some questions from the previous episode. I think I want to share a few thoughts about the previous episode because I wasn't on it. Yeah, I think that's all for this episode. This podcast is sponsored by Card Castle. They have an app that lets you scan your cards so you can sort your collection digitally. It's very convenient and free to use. Check out the link in the description. Okay, so the bracket system, right? This is pretty whack, yeah?
Yeah, there's a lot going on with it. I've already made a video about the bracket system, so I have a little bit of insight onto like the community sort of take on the brackets as like a whole. I got a lot of different opinions in that video. I think that video got like 300 or 50 comments or so. I read every single comment on that video. So I've come prepared with notes on all the nuances to my new take here, because my position has changed a little bit since that video.
Let's talk about what this bracket system is.
Yeah, I think it would be good to like clarify what we are actually talking about to begin with.
Yeah, so Wizards took over the rules committee and they want to set up this more official way to facilitate Rule Zero conversations. So they want to put cards in brackets. There's bracket 0, I guess technically. It's like there are cards that won't be on the bracket. Not every card is a bracketed card. Bracket 1 is things that can go in any deck. Swords to Plowshares, Grave Titan, Cultivate. Bracket 4 will have cards like Vampiric Tutor, Armageddon, Grim Monolith. Cards that make games too much more consistent, lopsided, or fast than the average deck can engage with. That was a quote from the article, which we'll also link in the description. And I'll also just read this paragraph as well. In this system, your deck would be defined by its highest bracket card or cards. This makes it clear what cards can go where and what kinds of cards you can expect people to be playing. For example, if Ancient Tomb is a bracket 4 card, your deck would generally be considered a 4. But if it's part of a Tomb-themed deck, the conversation may be, my deck is a 4 with Ancient Tomb, but a 2 without it. Is that okay with everyone?
That example's really dumb, but
so like immediately already we have issues, right? What happens if I have a bracket 4 card and a bracket 3 card? They had, I don't know, Drannith Magistrate as an example as a bracket 3 card, I think, in the image they showed on screen.
Yeah, there was a stream, right? And there was, yeah.
So like let's say I have a precon and I've added Drannith and I've added Ancient Tomb. No other changes. This deck is by no means bracket 4 CDH, like, you know, would I say my deck is a 1 my deck is a 4, but without Ancient Tomb it's a 3. But then also without Drannith Magistrate it's a 1. Like, is that what they expect?
I think the current system of your deck is defined by the highest bracket card that is in it is not very intuitive. Yeah, like the system that has been proposed currently, I don't think makes a lot of sense. Now, okay, the way they have it phrased in the thing makes a lot of sense. As in, like, you can call out these specific cards in the Rule Zero convo as them being part of your deck. So, as like a regulation thing, it kind of makes a little bit of sense. Like, this is my precon with blue in it. I added Cyclonic Rift into the deck. Is that okay with everyone? A new player upgrading the deck, or like someone not as experienced with, like, you know, the faux pas of Commander, might upgrade their deck with a Cyclonic Rift and then jump scare someone with that out of the precon. You know, you can kind of see the merit there. The main argument that I heard...
I legit don't. I don't get it. Like here's the thing is, if somebody's like, I'm playing a precon, I've made some upgrades to it. Okay, one of them might be a better board wipe. I don't know why people are like, oh, there's a Cycrift. Like, I don't know. It's fine.
Yeah, so to be clear, I have a list of pros and cons on my right here. And I have 2 pros and there's like 4 cons to the bracket system. One of the pros, and this was a comment that was like, I forgot who commented it. I feel so bad. But one of the comments was that brackets could be good if implemented in a way is more about self-identifying power. So this is a good tool for someone who doesn't quite know Commander yet. And they're like, how strong are these cards? Like, what's a litmus test for how strong of a deck I'm building? And they don't know that personally, but
Okay.
they can use the bracket system to sort of gauge the strength of their deck, and then use that in a rule zero conversation as a guide to be like, hey, I'm playing Rhystic Study and Cyclonic Rift in my deck, but besides those cards that are pretty high up in the brackets, my deck is just Merfolk, something like that. And then eventually, like that actually eases that into the conversation instead of, oh, the Merfolk player jammed their Rhystic Study that they opened from Wilds of Eldraine or something, you know what I mean? And then everyone's like salty and like, oh, why do you have this in your Merfolk deck? Like it engages some sort of conversation. And I felt that was like a really good point. Is like it helps newer players sort of like get a litmus test of how strong the cards they're putting in their deck is, or how strong the combos are that they're putting in their deck. I thought that was interesting, and that sort of brings me back to that previous conversation that we were having about your deck being defined by the highest bracket thing that's in it. I don't want to say card because it's also pitched softly that combos are going to be included in brackets somehow.
Yeah. Well, we should also clarify that they have said that the bracket system is still like in development. It might not be 4 brackets. They might add 5, 6, or 12
Yeah.
or whatever, right? And that it might include other things like any 2 card combo is a bracket 4 or something like that.
Yeah, like I don't know if I would say
Or
yeah,
I think
like
actually the example Gavin gave was like Sanguinite Exquisite Blood, right? It's 10 mana, 2 cards, but it's pretty slow. It's 10 mana.
yeah.
So like that would be like, bracket 2 or whatever. Whereas like Thassa's Oracle Consultation, 3 mana, 2 card combo, that'd be like bracket 4 because it's like super efficient and low cards.
Yeah. What I'm trying to say here is like that was a really good point for brackets. Um for me, I can see brackets working now. This is the only world, at least right now. I mean, pitch your ideas in the comments down below, guys. If I'm off base here, but the world I see brackets working, where if it is solely about self-identifying your power for rule zero conversations, and it's not a way to police other players. It basically what I mean is it's entirely descriptive. You are using it to describe what your deck is doing, and you're not proscribing it. You're not being like, oh, we're all playing bracket 3 decks, but you have a bracket 4 card in your bracket 3 deck, and you didn't disclose that game 0, and your bracket 4 card was like something dumb that doesn't even matter. Like,
Right.
I do not want to live in that world where everyone is like, I go to a game store and like all my decks are bracket 3. Say I have like Fabricate and Tutors and stuff like that, nothing too broken, but like it might be up on the list. And I go to that game store and they're all like, oh, we are all bracket 2 gamers, sorry, we do not play with bracket 3 decks here.
Yeah.
I don't want that hard law to be the case, and I don't think there's anything insinuating that that's going to be the case, but I can totally see some sort of like zealots taking this bracket system and then using it to police other players and like guilt tripping other players. And what I would really like to see more than anything is the new WotC RC, whatever Gavin puts in place. He mentioned, having like a Pauper format panel, but for Commander.
Yeah.
I would really like to see him get ahead of this and be like, listen, this is not meant to police other players' brackets. It's meant entirely to identify your own deck strength to help you with Rule Zero conversations. This is not meant to be a tool to call out people for, pub stomping or start a witch hunt against someone, right? Like, I desperately, I want this system to work in that Rule Zero world where it's a new player identifying their deck. And I don't want that to become, oh, I now have an objective way to yell at my friends for playing cards I don't like.
You see, that's my biggest problem with this idea of having it be specific cards. So my problem is ultimately, like in the grand scheme of things, I think people overreact to individual cards too much. I think that's the problem. Like, oh, why do you have a Rhystic Study? I don't know. They pulled it. It's just they use it as card draw in their deck because they draw cards with it. It's like, it's not that big a deal, And the I feel like this can make those like accusations kind of go like a little crazier because I feel like. So I've been like recently before this happened, I was testing out in my EDH decks. I cut Rhystic, I cut Soul Ring, I cut Mana Crypt, I cut Dockside before the bans. Like I just cut all these cards, these generically powerful cards, and my decks run exactly the same basically. Like I was still winning most of my casual games. Like everything's the same. It's because the context of your deck is like what matters. I feel like the brackets instead should not involve any cards. There should be no specific examples of cards at all. Instead, it should be about like what the deck does generally. So I talked about this a long time ago on my power level video, where I said that for my Rule Zero conversations, I usually just say, hey, are we doing low power, mid power, high power, CDH? 4 brackets, if you will. And I think that has worked so well for years, because almost everybody just says mid power, and then we play a game and we all have fun and we all go home and that's it. I've been playing a lot of EDH for a long time at a lot of different stores with a lot of different people, and I rarely have people actually get like upset at the end of a game. And I play rule of law effects, I play counter spells, I play Cycrypt, I play Rhystic Study. Not recently, I guess, but I've been playing all these cards for like years, and it's just as long as your deck is kind of like a fair deck, it's not too explosive, it's not too crazy, then it's fine. And I wonder if we're gonna end up with the every deck is a 7 situation here, where every deck is a 2.
Yeah, I mean, so to the extent of this, it is more objective than every deck is a 2, because since in how Wizards is approaching this is the brackets will be populated by certain cards and certain combos. So you will objectively say this card, like Thalia, for instance, the Heretic Cathar, the one that makes your non-basic lands enter tapped, that was classified as a bracket 2 card. So you would definitively have okay, this is a 2 out of 4. If brackets, they go along this line and they have signpost cards in them and not a whole list of cards, you are correct. It's going to be the power level 1 through 10 situation again, where every deck is a 10, because someone plays, say, Archon of Emeria. Going by the Thalia example, Archon of Emeria makes your opponent's lands, non-basic lands, enter the battlefield tapped, but it also has a rule of law effect stapled on it. Hey, it hurts me as much as it hurts you guys, besides the non-basic land part. So it's actually worse than Thalia. It's actually a bracket 1 card, and it's like you can get a lot of angle shooting there if it's not like if it's just signpost cards and not actual and then that's
right,
going to
like
create
if Armageddon's on there, is Ravagers of War going to be there?
Yeah, like Armageddon's on there, and then what about I'm trying to like Ravages of War is of course like a worse one, or Ravages
No,
of War
that's identical.
Yeah, no, Ravages of War is the same. Yeah, you're correct. But I feel like that's a lot more like of a 1-to-1 comparison versus
Bender Break.
yeah, that's a lot better. Boom Bust.
Boom Bust, yeah, there we go. Sure.
Yeah, like where Boom Bust is like, oh, but it's 6 mana, it's like, like you're gonna have angle shooters like that, and the argument against that is like these people are going to suck to play against no matter what system's in place.
Yeah, I think Gavin addressed that in the stream, right? He said, bad actors are bad actors. You could always pub stomp in any situation, so like this is no different, which I agree with him. I think it's going to be maybe even easier if you really wanted to. I want to be clear. I think that the mythical pub stomper is super rare in casual Commander. Like, I've almost never seen it. It's just sometimes a deck can get off to a fast start, especially with like Soul Ring, a bracket 0 card.
Yeah.
And it can get off to a fast start, and if nobody plays removal, which people usually don't play enough removal, it just means that they play their Snowball Commander and they just like spin into a win. It's not that they're a pub stomper, it's just that like their deck high rolled. Every deck can do it basically.
Especially if you have a revolving door of opponents where you're just like constantly playing against different people, you're gonna see different people like have that high roll start, and then you're never gonna see them again.
Exactly, and then you're like, oh, what a pub stomper, even though their deck might have been super jank. 90% of the time they just happen to. Yeah, exactly. I've definitely seen that happen where like some decks like are so poorly constructed, but I played against the person multiple times, and it's like when they open with like Soul Ring, like the deck goes crazy, but like they're also playing like 30 lands and they just get land screwed half the time, and their deck usually does nothing. I do think it'll be fun to brew the most busted bracket 1 deck.
That is one of the pros I have here, is that brackets could provide fun deck building restrictions for those invested in the format.
Okay, bracket 1 tournament might go crazy. I feel like it's going to be... Here's my problem, is I feel like it's going to be really, really, really green dominated. Because right now CDH is not very green dominated because combos are something that green's not very good at dealing. Although Thrasios is probably going to come back now that Jewel Lotus is gone. Anyway, ignoring that. But in bracket 1, it's going to be like no combos. So, what am I going to do? I'm just going to ramp. It's going to be Rampant Growth, Cultivate, Kodama's Reach, the Beanstalk Giant, I don't know. And you're just going to like turbo ramp and you can steamroll the entire table in bracket 1. It'll be so easy.
Yeah, so for me, what scares me about this idea of tournaments being at different brackets is I don't want it to further cement the idea that brackets or decks of different brackets can't interact with each other. I think it's totally possible that you have a deck that's technically a bracket 3 and you have a table of bracket 2s and they just want to play a game together. I think that shouldn't be a forbidden thing that happens.
Considering you can make a deck that is 98 basics, Ancient Tomb, and Kenrith, and that's a bracket 4 deck, like
it's not the best system that they proposed in terms of how to like actually score your deck. Here's what comes to mind. I have a Tekkathal deck. It's a very fragile deck, but it would still be classified probably as bracket 3 because of like Urza Saga, Fabricate, War of Invention, that sort of thing. Besides those cards that would make it a bracket 3, and it has bracket 3 draws. Like you could like definitely have like a powerful draw without those tutors. It plays like a 2 most of the time. And what happens when I take out those tutors to sit at a bracket 2 table is now we're just going to have an inconsistent explosive game every so often where I draw the good cards that I would have tutored for.
Yeah, and then people think you're pub stomping.
Yeah.
Oh, look at this combo deck. It's going crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, my deck is technically bracket 2, but I just happen to draw the cards I would have tutored for. And then I explode, and then, I win. Versus, then I'm going to have games where it's going to perform like a bracket 0 deck, and I just don't draw anything. And so I think that's just going to lead to more inconsistent games.
Yeah, I think tutors, honestly, should just not be on the bracket thing. It's going to mean my Tawanos Bauble Tribal deck built around a hidden commander in the 99 is going to be like bracket, 4, because I have like Transmute Artifact in there.
Oh, yeah.
Just to search up Salvaging Stage, it's going to be bracket 4. And then my Foxglove deck, maybe if I take out Force of Will, I think, and Mana Drain, which could easily be swapped for 2 other counter spells and the deck's not that much worse, would be like a bracket 1 or 2 probably, and it's way stronger than my Tawanos deck. It's
in this world, when you say something along the lines of, I have Worldly Tutor in my deck, this makes it bracket 4. I use it only to search for my secret commander. And then and you can be like, I'm not going to spoil who my secret commander is, but I definitely have one in there. And I imagine most people are going to be like, that's fine. And that's how I imagine that conversation is going to boil down. Either that happens or everyone just ignores brackets and just goes, hey guys, are we all playing medium power? Okay, great. I have this fun deck here and let's go. And then they're just going to jam a game and people are going to be like, oh, what bracket is your deck? And they're going to be like, oh, and they're going to just jam the game anyway. I feel like it's going to take some time for people to actually move on to brackets. And even then some people aren't going to adopt it. If there's one thing I know about a lot of Magic players is that they're very stubborn about what changes.
Yeah. Oh man. I don't know. Yeah. It's just, I feel like these brackets are going to be bad. I just think that they're not going to have the, I think it's just not going to have the right stuff to, actually curate a good system. Yeah. I feel like.
So I definitely think that Magic is too complex a game to have any sort of definitive system to rank how strong your deck is. But
exactly,
like I said before, the ideal world for brackets is entirely descriptive. Oh, this is a very strong card according to the bracket system. I'm new to the game. I don't quite know the dynamics of the game. So this card must be too strong to put into my deck if I wanted to keep it pretty friendly or whatever. Or if I put a Ristic Study in my deck, it should be the only sort of card like that. Something along those lines, I feel like the brackets actually succeed very well. but not when you're, once again, prescribing, using it. Like, I don't, the last thing I want is for brackets to become some sort of tool for a really like sort of mean, toxic person. Of course they're going to be toxic and mean anyway, but to give them any sort of air of legitimacy to their claims, like, oh, you're playing with bracket 4 cards, you must be a monster, right? Something like that. Like, you have a definitive witch hunt list now. I have like a laundry list of cards that Wizard of the Coast themselves say that are too strong. Like, I don't want it to be that. I think it should be entirely descriptive, and I think it would be very healthy if it was entirely descriptive like that, and actually really good. Once again, just as an information source for new players to sort of gauge their deck strength. I do want to mention one thing. This is something that Snail mentioned to me, and it definitely is an interesting thought, which is it might actually stifle Rule Zero conversations more than help. This is something else that the RC would need to get in front of, is if these more invested brewers in the game, because brackets are meant to help newer players, in my opinion, people who are less invested, at least in the game, not necessarily newer, but people who are not as invested in Magic as we are. You're listening to a podcast about Magic, for God's sakes. You're very invested.
If there's any new players, like, leave a comment.
No,
that'd be pretty interesting.
Not necessarily new
this
players.
This is the first introduction to Magic.
Yeah, you could be a decade in and still not be invested in Magic per se, you know.
I mean, that's true. A lot of people do play on and off. I get that a lot.
Yeah, but
sorry, continue.
But these players, this is who I imagine the bracket system's for, is to help them identify how strong their deck is. Now, what might happen is when we use the bracket system for Rule Zero conversations, is the people who are more invested, the bracket 1 tournament grinders, so to speak, they might find a combo like Leonin Relic Ward or Animate Dead, probably not exactly that, but like something along those lines, where it's like, ooh, both these cards are bracket 1 and it's a 2-card combo, or like, you know, these cards are all work together really insanely and win the game on like turn 4 or turn 5 really easily, and then they will absolutely cause carnage in those bracket 1 pods.
I think it's gonna be even simpler than that, because like, it's probably, you know, if they say bracket 2 is 2-card combos up, right? Or they say bracket 1 is no combos, I think it's gonna be even simpler. It's gonna be like they just play like Luris, and they play like a graveyard recursive deck.
Oh yeah.
And they just, you know, loop Shriek Maws and loop all these like things that kill stuff over and over again, right? And new players aren't going to know how to beat that. They're just going to be like, well, my deck's bracket 1, their deck's bracket 1.
Yeah, that's the worst part, is like what this bracket system could enable. Now, I'm saying, like, of course, the RC could get in front of this and be like, listen, this is how you're going to be using the bracket system. You're not going to just be saying, my deck is bracket 1, and then that's the end of the conversation. Like, you need to get ahead of this, because if you're just allowed to go up to a table and be like, yeah, I only have bracket 1 cards in my deck, and then you just absolutely crush every game you're in because you're just like annihilating players with your superior knowledge, what is the bracket system doing here?
But I feel like you can do that if any new player is going to get crushed by an experienced player. You know, it's weird. So I guess Snail maybe he's right that it does stifle Rule Zero conversation, but I personally stifle Rule Zero conversations. If somebody starts telling me about their deck, whoops, I banged my table. If somebody starts telling me about their deck, I'm like, whoa. Don't tell me about the cool cards you have in there. Don't tell me about your combos, or even if you have one, like, please don't tell me. Like, I don't want to know. I want to learn it in the game. Now, if they ask me, do I have infinite combos, blah, 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 any question about my deck, I'm never going to, like, deny them. I'm not going to be like, no, I won't tell you. But I'll if somebody's trying to tell me about their deck, I'll really try and stop them, because I think that's part of the fun of the game, is, like, I don't know if your deck is a Ratatouille themed deck, but it'll be kind of fun to find out mid-game.
Yeah, that's fair. Like, there is a bit of mystery that's lost. I mean, I think I'm kind of in the same boat, where I will offer the information freely if asked, but like otherwise, like, maybe I'm not too interested in hearing about it. I'm also just not someone who gets really too tilted over Commander, unless someone...
I mean, yeah, me neither.
Unless I have like a total Salt Lord who's just ruining the experience for everyone. That's like the only time I'm actually going to get frustrated with a game, something like that, which of course is just like a non-gameplay element. Like, if I'm gonna get like locked out of a game, I might like laugh super hard, but like, I'm not gonna be like, oh, this game's terrible, like, whatever. Like, I consume so much Magic that like a bad game night for me isn't my week ruined, so to speak. But keep in mind, some players who are only playing Magic once a week at their local game store, they just want to get a couple games of Commander in, and then they get repeatedly stomped and smushed by like vampiric tutors. This is who this system's for. These are the people who want to know what's in the deck.
I get like one game night a week. That's all I have.
Yeah, but like you
That's me.
yeah, but like, do you play with patrons every so often? Do you play online, spell table, stuff like this?
Like once a week if I don't go to the local game store.
Oh gosh, really?
I work a full-time job and then I also do this.
That's true.
I'm editing the podcast if I'm not working.
I,
Like I don't have time
yeah,
to
that's
do a ton of games, and I will still sometimes lose games, and it's fine. It's
yeah.
ultimately it's a game. I think people take it too seriously.
That's fair. I definitely do think a lot of players take Commander a little too seriously, but that being said, I definitely understand the frustration of like, oh man, I just worked super hard. I get my one game night a week and I'm going to just get absolutely smushed. And that's just your experience every week, which is like, that's rough, buddy. Um, Anyway, I do have one more thing kind of on my mind about brackets, and that is I've seen a lot of people say tier 5, you should add to tier 5 for CEDH, or tier 4 should be CEDH. I think that'd be really disappointing.
I think it's also unnecessary.
Yeah, exactly. CEDH doesn't need this system. And yeah, and it shouldn't be on it. The rule zero of CEDH is, okay, we're all going to bring the best deck we can, and we're going to try to build the most broken deck, and we're going to try to win, okay? And that's the CEDH rule zero. It's like you don't even say anything because it's just inferred by we're going to be playing competitively here.
Well, yeah, you just say, are you playing CDH? If the answer is yes, then it's like,
Yeah,
okay, I know what's up.
Wasting a tier on this demographic is entirely pointless. It's just a tool they don't need. Like, we don't need a tier for CEDH. Let's just keep this in the casual sphere. Like, we don't need, oh, tier 4 is CEDH decks. Like, they don't need it. Let's keep it casual, lens focused. Like, the max should be high power casual.
Right, where Armageddon is actually like a thing, right?
Yeah,
this is a card that doesn't see any CDH play.
Like Kalia is like jamming Armageddon all day. Like that's where I would totally expect to see an Armageddon. That's where I expect to hear someone in Rule Zero say, "Listen, guys, I have an Armageddon in my deck. I get on the ground really early, and then I'm gonna try and blow up all your lands." And I'm like, great, let's go. Like these are the sort of tables that want the bracketing, not CEDH. If bracketing ever gets off, that is.
So before we move off of brackets, I want I guess a final opinion here. Do you think that the bracket system could work? If so, how would you change it? Or no, just they should give up on it?
Okay.
I know that was a loaded question.
Yeah, I think I'm scared mostly that brackets won't solve anything because it's less of a system's fault and more just like individual like social issues that are causing problems in games. Bad actors, stuff like that. But if this is my ideal world for brackets, it is a very easy onboarding process for people who maybe are from other formats who don't know about like how kneecapping yourself is seen as virtuous in Commander. It's for players who are not as invested in the game or as invested in deck building. And it is going to be a quick referential tool to see how to build a deck that it can interact at a casual table. Like, oh, Rhystic Study is bracket 3 or 4. That card is seen as annoying. Maybe I don't put my Wilds of Eldraine Rhystic Study in my deck, and instead I opt for a different on-theme card draw spell or whatever. Or, like you use a less, well-known card in that example. Basically, just like I said before, using it as a descriptor instead of a proscriptor. That is where I see brackets actually having a purpose, is really helping these players who might not know the format too well build their deck, and then using that to also describe what their deck is going to do and at what level it's going to function at.
I think that the brackets could work if they were purely descriptive.
Yes.
Like actually no cards, nothing there. I see. Just like, explaining like, hey, bracket 1 probably has no infinite combos that are less than 5 pieces. They might have some large restriction, thematic restriction on them. Every creature has to have a character with a beard on it or something. Like that's one bracket order. I'm not saying that should be the bracket, but just like as an example, like it should be descriptive like that. And then, bracket 4 is you're playing things that are very difficult to interact with, mass land destruction, resource denial, combos that can really only be interacted with niche pieces, like Thassa's Oracle can only be interacted with like
Stifle,
Torpor Orb and something. Yeah. And it shouldn't be this like list of cards. It should just be like description and vibes, because that's kind of how Commander is. And most players, most decks should just fit into the middle bracket 2 probably, where it's possible you might see some infinite combo that's like 3 or 4 pieces. You just gotta think about that, or they might have some powerful cards like the Thalia or whatever was bracket 2, or it might show up. And that's kind of how like everybody should approach the game, right? Is when you're playing casual commander, the whole format, the purpose of EDH is deck diversity, right? So by restricting it and saying like, whoa, this bracket can only have this bracket can't have that, you're ruining that. That's the part of commander. This is why I don't want people to tell me about their deck. I love seeing your unique decks. So like the brackets should generally like tailor it so that if you have a heavy restriction, you're here. If there's no restrictions, like budget lists, like you got your crazy stuff, you're here, and then most decks fall into this middle section.
Yeah.
Again, low power, mid power, high power, CEDH. The 4 brackets I came up with.
Yeah, the only thing I'm scared about with just like these descriptive sort of brackets instead of like some concrete sort of like examples is you could have this sort of situation where you have angle shooters or whatever, or like someone's like, ooh, I'm kind of making an inferment here, and then they play the deck, and then someone's like, oh, this feels bad because I feel like this is in my bracket 3, but it's in your bracket 2. If we're just like like nebulous sort of descriptive examples.
Yeah, but you could do that with the card list. Otherwise, the card list is going to have to be hundreds and hundreds of cards, right?
Thousands. Like
right, the thousands. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like
it's unrealistic to have it be, unless they're putting the whole Wizards team behind this and they're like, these 1,000 cards are bracket 4.
From what it sounded like, they were going to do some amount of community sourcing and get sort of like salt tier vibes sort of things going on, and then build a website for it. And I've talked a bit about how I feel like most Magic players, well, it is definitive that most Magic players don't use things like Moxfield already. So seeing that online resource, maybe people don't use it. It's all of this has just been speculation, really. Like we've gotten so little to chew on. It's just such a strange concept. These sort of like rules for Rule Zero. Yeah, no, it's a lot to think about in terms of what they've pitched. I definitely think the soft pitch where it was is not the best. All we can do is really wait and see how they pedal this forward.
Yes, but before we wait and see, we should see what everyone else says. Please, leave a comment. Let us know what you think about the bracket system. Are you and your play group going to be bracketing it up, or are you just going to everybody's a 7?
I really want to hear about your opinions of last podcast episode since you weren't here.
Oh, what makes the deck worth it?
Oh yeah, what did you think about the last episode?
I thought it was pretty good. I think I wanted to just touch on like what I think makes a deck worth it, because I feel like I had a different opinion to you two. If you didn't watch last week's episode, you should go back and watch it. I wasn't there. I wasn't on the episode. It was just Elk and Snail. The forest critters took over the bauble factory. One thing that is, well, man, this kind of touches in on my own personal deck restrictions, which I feel like maybe could just be next week's episode if nothing crazy happens. But I feel like for me, what makes a deck worth it is I have like a narrative for what the deck is supposed to do. A lot of people might have this if you're like, oh, my deck is a dedicated combo deck or whatever. Here's the narrative of I'm going to play this and then tutor these up and then play my Maze's End or whatever, right? But for me, it's always more convoluted than that. I had a Esper cycling deck, and the narrative was like, okay, I get my cycling value piece on, I get my graveyard recursion in here, and then I like loop these around in this way to like grind for value. And then I do that and I slowly drain people out. And then, like, that's the goal of the deck. And I have to set up all these pieces. It's not an infinite combo. It's not a hard lock. It's not any of that. It's like 12 pieces. But that's like the idea for the deck is I'm using this kind of weird engine to generate value. And that's what makes a deck worth it for me, is like, can I attain this line? Can I like reach this point?
Oh yeah.
And then I do have the other side of that where like the first time I played that deck, it worked perfectly. And I actually got like all like 8 value engines or whatever crazy thing I had going on. Nobody had any enchantment removal. So I just got to keep playing value engines. And then the deck worked perfectly, and I was like, "Wow, this was so good." And then I scrapped
Yeah,
it.
you just take it apart. I was about to say that's your routine.
It's yeah. It's like I hit like, "Oh wow, this was the dream for the
Oh
deck," and then I'm
yeah.
done.
Once you get your your fill of your deck of like whatever unique deck you build, you're like, oh, all right, I did my thing. Broken toy. You just drop it.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then I think you guys, I like that you touched on decks that are very modular, can be changed a lot. So, like, there's that new room commander that came out. But, like, when are we getting rooms again? I don't
Yeah.
know, 50 years from now? So, like, the deck's going to be stagnant. I'm thinking about making a whole video on that, to be honest.
Oh yeah, I narrow commanders. I mean, there's definitely an audience for them, like I mentioned in that video.
If you love rooms, like, this is your
Yeah,
deck.
but also like there's something comforting about having a deck that you won't need to upgrade for like 2 or 3 years.
That's also true. But room fans, sound off in the comments
The
below.
room.
They say I love the room. I haven't seen the room actually. All right, question zone, question zone. We have a question. So I'm gonna cut that shit. So we're gonna answer some questions from the previous episode. If you have a question, leave it in the comments. Put question zone in front of it to help us find your questions, and we'll try to get to them on the next episode. You can also tweet at us if you want. Anyway, so Converse Fall 5928. What are your favorite multiplayer themes? Goad, Myriad, Monarch, etc.
So I feel that monarchy works so well in multiplayer. It is such a cool mechanic, specifically when you do not pillow fort. I like any mechanic that actually gets combat going. Goad, I'm a little bit more like middling on when it comes to that because I feel like
What?
okay, so listen.
Okay, that's crazy. Hold on. Yeah. Tell me.
So Goad, I'm more middling on because there's less nuance to it. Goad, you pick which opponent you attack, but you're always going to pick the guy who's open. It punishes the player who's slowest to develop. And then like your next goaded opponent, right? Because like Disrupt Decorum or Cardor, Doom Scourge or something like that. What happens is the guy who's like last in turn order, who has developed the least, is just going to get hit by like 2 waves of creatures before they get to untap again. And then also there's just less nuance, right? When I have a goaded creature, I am forced to attack with it, period, against someone, probably the weakest player at the table. When someone has the monarchy, I have to think about whether or not it's good to swing at them. It forces combat, but not in a way where it actually like forces you to take the game action. And so there's more nuance with monarchy than there is with Goad, which is why I like monarchy more as a mechanic. Like Goad's an okay mechanic. I don't hate it. It's just like, I'm kind of middling on it, especially when they printed it into the ground. Also Goad should let them attack you, the Goader. I feel like that would be way more cool.
They do if you're in a 1v1.
Yeah, exactly. Only if you're in a 1v1 though. They have to attack a different player if able. If otherwise, I think it would be way more cool if you could like set up like a defense. I'm mostly just salty because I really, really want more cards that force opponents to attack you. For who's the dumb ogre guy? A Kazul. Whenever an opponent attacks you, they have to pay 3 or else you get a 3/3 ogre. That guy.
I played Kazul as my Goad commander because then when it gets to 1v1, all the Goad cards they force into swing into you.
If it gets to 1v1, you are 100% dying first or second with that deck.
I was cooking with my Kazul deck. I this is why I love you as my co-host, because I have the exact opposite opinion. I think Goad is the best multiplayer mechanic, and I think Monarchy and especially the Initiative are doo-doo. I do not like them at all.
I don't like the Initiative, to be fair. I do like
The
Monarchy.
Initiative is just too powerful. Like, but we'll focus on Monarchy because Initiative is, I think we can generally agree. So, you mentioned it briefly. You zoomed past it there. The pillow forting. I really don't like that the Monarchy and the Initiative are very often free value. You just pillow fort up, you play those things, and you don't even need to attack because the thing will often on ETB yoink it from you. So what you do is you just pillow fort. It's uninteractable. They can't remove your Monarchy. They can't do anything. And then if somebody is like they Cycrift and they swing in and they manage to chip away, You replay the thing that gives you the monarchy, and you just yoink it back. You replay your pillar fort stuff, and whoop, I'm good. I'm done.
Yeah, it can definitely be a game of keep away, which is definitely the one like toxic play pattern the monarchy sort of gets. But
See,
I feel
that's where you're wrong. I think there's two actually.
oh, what's the other?
The other one is when somebody doesn't build around the monarchy at all. Right? They have no relevant protection. No, they're not like a deck that builds a huge board. They're not a deck that protects themselves well. None of those things. And they just play a random monarchy card to draw one card, and then the player who's already ahead, the strongest deck at the table, who already has a huge board, hits them, takes it, and then suddenly the other three players who are already behind are way behind because now they're getting even more value, and you can't stop them from getting that value. And it often becomes the person who is ahead just got to get even further ahead for free, essentially.
Yeah, but that also happens with Goad. If you have a very wide, very good board, no one's swinging into you. They're only swinging into the worse off players.
I'm swinging into them as the Goad. Dude, I love Goad decks. So I'm playing Jessica Timna right now.
Yeah.
And that's my Goad deck, which is super fun. Like, you Goad something, you triple the damage with Timna, and you swing in. But when somebody is like really ahead on board and I Goad their stuff, then I use Jessica to buff my own stuff, and I just swing at them, and I chip in at the person who I'm goading. So, like, I'm pushing damage into them, they're pushing damage into the rest of the table, and you just funnel damage this way. And then they're also getting low.
For me as well, it might just because I'm unlucky or something, but every time I goad someone's creatures, it's like, okay, I'm going to convoke in my pre-combat main phase and tap all my creatures. And then it's like I did nothing. The amount of times... it's more than I can count on my hands. Playing like a sort of a goad card in my deck that they have some way to tap their best creatures and therefore do not have to attack with them. And then the goading has done nothing besides maybe remove a blocker, I suppose.
Yeah, I haven't really had that issue very much. I've been playing I've been obsessed with Goad for like years now. I was playing Grenzo for a while, and then Kazul for a while, and then I added 2 colors, and I'm playing Mardu Goad.
Maybe
I don't know. Maybe you should play more Goad.
Maybe. Oh man, I think you'd feel less bad about the monarchy if Hull Breacher wasn't banned.
Yeah, that'd be funny. If I had Notion Thief, I could just give people the.
Yeah, no, I love.
I don't know.
the
Maybe it's
monarchy.
also because. It might also because I'm a Pauper player and I'm so bitter about the monarchy.
Oh, I
like,
love the monarchy and Pauper. Are you kidding? Demir control, mono black
my
control,
God.
Thorn of the Dusk Rose. Yes, please.
It feels so broken, dude. It's so unfair.
Oh man, I love Palace jailering people in Cube. Oh,
Yeah,
dude,
it's just so busted. I don't know. I hate uninteractable things because like my whole thing is like I'm not salty about anything because everything's interactable, right? I play enchantment removal, so if you play a humility, I can blow it up, right? If you like set up with the initiative, I literally can't do anything. There's nothing in the game I can do about it, you know.
Oh, you can hit them with a creature.
I can hit them with a creature, yeah, which is crazy. I don't play those, so maybe that's my problem. My counter spells don't work. Yeah, am I just sounding like too much of a blue mage?
Oh, for 100%.
I say as I shill my Mardu Goad deck. Alright, you have a question zone question for us?
Yeah, this one's from Dice Dude 1071. Maybe an odd question for a commander-focused podcast, but how would you go about encouraging your playgroup to play game modes other than Commander?
I feel like I've got a good answer.
My answer is very simple.
Cube.
It's mentioned here, Cube. Cube is so good. Dice Dude here in his own question mentioned that he played Cube and it went very well. Keep playing Cube. Cube is incredible. Very fun. Nice way to spend an evening. You can draft with 2 players if you do Campfire or Winston. You can do, 4-player pods with 5 packs of 9 cards. Like there's so many ways you can break up Cube to just make it work for any size group of people. It's incredible for that. You get to sculpt the exact experience you want to have. That being said, you also mentioned DanDan. Definitely
I haven't mentioned it yet, but I was about to say it. You beat me to my own answer.
DanDan is very good. Any sort of DanDan variant. DanDan's just like a sort of like pre-constructed like deck that you share. It's a mono blue tempo mirror. You should just look up what DanDan is. I can't just explain it. Sorry, podcast listeners. You need to look it up after your commute.
It's a format with one deck. It's a 1v1, but you both share a deck and graveyard. The gimmick is you play cards like Brainstorm that mess with the top of the deck, so you can mess with what your opponent draws.
Oh yeah, Mystic Sanctuary, stuff like that. Like,
yes,
absolutely.
My buddy Logan and we both built custom DanDan decks that are not mono blue tempo. I built mono green DanDan, and he built mono red DanDan. And sometimes at the commander, we would be like, "Hey, you want to play DanDan with 2 DanDan decks? We can split the commander pot into 2 DanDan games." It's so fun. I'll put a link to I made a video explaining DanDan. Maybe I'll do a new one or something. Nobody watched that. That was like an old video. But I'll put a link in the description to my mono green DanDan deck. It's like $30 or something. I think less, $25. It's super cheap to build. It's super fun. You build it. Your friends don't have to have it. They can just play against you. And Logan, his mono red DanDan deck is sweet because since you share a graveyard, it's full of phoenixes. So it's you and your opponent racing to like self-mill and then meet the condition to steal the phoenixes out of the yard back to your side of the field. It's fun. I'll put a link to that too.
You could also just play Flip It or Rip It, just buy a bunch of booster packs.
Nope, hold up. Have you ever had a card or mechanic that inspired you to build a deck around it? Like Sunforger, for example.
It's funny you mentioned Sunforger. I have a couple Sunforger drafts on the back burner that I have not yet built in paper, but I have definitely play tested because I love Leon and Shiraki, which lets you equip at instant speed.
Yeah.
And then you have like a cost reducer that zeros Sunforger's equip cost, and then you just like spam abuse that in response to everyone's spells and just do Sunforger control. It's so annoying. And then you like Mistveil planes the cards back into your deck. Oh man, I love Sunforger. But yes, Sunforger. I guess the closest I've gotten is like my own Farrakha deck. That is built around a mechanic. It's Constellation and Gravebreak. It's just activating Farrakha and making her ability do as many things as possible besides also make a snake. My Tekkathol deck is all built around Proliferate, mono blue Proliferate.
I love building around cards in the 99. It's my favorite thing. I think you shouldn't have a big powerhouse snowball commander in the command zone. I think it leads to like terrible gameplay patterns. I don't think it's good. I would much rather have like a synergy value piece in the command zone that does something interesting that works with the rest of the deck. And like I have built around so many hidden commanders: Salvaging Station, Sunforger, Kaho, High Tide, Life from the Loam, some other weird stuff. I built around Adnaz for like life loss, not for the card advantage. There's so many things I love. This is why I hate tutors on the bracket. Is like I love tutoring for my like jank in the 99 card.
Yeah, I have a video coming out someday soon.
Yeah.
It's going to involve talking about how tutors are only as boring as you let them be.
I know. I feel like that topic, I can't do a video on it. The script's looking good. I'm excited to see
it. Thank you. Someday it'll be out soon, TM. Anyway, thank you for all your questions.
Yes. Remember, you can tweet at us as well, but you can also leave it in the comments here. Right? Question Zone.
Spotify.
We got Spotify comments. I see people commenting there occasionally. You can also follow us on Spotify if you want to listen to this there. They come out at the same time.
Yeah, once again, just make sure you mark Question Zone at the beginning of your comment so we can pick it out easier.
I think we're also on YouTube Music now, if somebody out there listens to podcasts in that way.
Oh man, YouTube Music, my go-to music app.
It's where everybody listens to all the podcasts.
Okay, great. Now that we're at the end of the podcast, I can quickly say I absolutely hate the new Uzumaki. It's really dropped the ball. It's ruined my day. Super sad about that. It's so sad because Uzumaki was in production for 6 years and it was 4 episodes, and the quality drop is abhorrent. It's actually hilarious. When you go to the Wikipedia for Uzumaki, you see episode 1 has 2 animation directors, and then episode 2 has like 20 or like 23 animation directors. All of them are from like Chinese outsourced studios. Oh yeah, no, it's really the quality drop is insane. Episode 1 had like this incredible rotoscoped animation. It looked really cool. The pacing was a little bit off for me for episode 1, but it was good to look at. Episode 2, all of that's out the window. It looks horrible. It was the worst thing ever. But yeah, no, Uzumaki sucks, and that makes me really sad because I like the manga a lot.
Should we end the podcast now?
Oh yeah, probably.
Okay. Cool.